Hello. Thank you joining us. Thank you for joining us tonight for a virtual panel on the implications of election results on world global peace. I'm Tuba Dennis from Peace Sounds Institute in Connecticut. Following the events of what was the biggest turnout on U.S. election history, I am pleased to be joining you here tonight with Dr. Annette Boletsky, Dr. Nelson Alino, and Dr. Terry Mollner. Thank you all so much for joining us. Seeing as how we have a topic tonight that the rest of the world is also talking about as we speak, I would like to dive straight into the main event. We will be giving each of our panelists about 10 minutes to discuss their views on the implications of elections on global peace. During this time, if our viewers have any questions that they would like to ask, please go ahead and comment it on the live YouTube chat box, where later I will be asking your questions to them directly after all the panelists have spoken. Panelists, you are also welcome to ask each other any questions during this time. To get started, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Terry Mollner, but before that, let me introduce you to him. Dr. Mollner is founder and chair of Stakeholders Capital Incorporated, a socially responsible asset management firm in Massachusetts and California, and the Massachusetts-based Trusteeship Institute Incorporated, an economic and social policy think tank since 1972. He is a founding member of the board of directors of Calvert Social Investment Funds and Calvert Impact Capital. In 2000, he also took the lead that resulted in Ben & Jerry's Homemade being bought by Unilever Incorporated, so it legally sustained its ability to be a socially responsible company and afterwards served on its board for 18 years. He is the author of 12 Self-Evident Truths About Truth and Recommended Priorities for 2020 U.S. Presidential Candidates, Common Good Capitalism is Inevitable, and Love Skill, We Are Each Mastering the 7 Layers of Human Maturity. He is a fellow of the World Business Academy and a member of the Social Venture Network. Dr. Mollner, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Tuba. Well, hello, everybody. I want to briefly tell you what I think is going to be the significant things that I hope will be happening with the Biden administration. But then I want to go into something that I think is really important for all of us to be aware of, because there is a significant change about to be occurring throughout humanity. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first, the main things I want to say about the Biden administration is he must not be as naive as Barack Obama was and think he can work with the Republicans. The Republicans are not interested in anything other than accumulating power. So he should work as hard as he can to work with them, but he should not bank on it. He should do as many executive orders as he can get done. Secondly, he must control the news, not using Twitter, but have an announcement every day. Television stations are concerned about selling commercials. That's their priority, and they need to have something hot to talk about. Trump provided them that. So what he needs to do is to provide them something of quality to talk about every day, rather than something that's junk. The next thing I would want to say is that the second year of his administration, I would suggest that he focus on foreign policy and the re-election of candidates, because there's going to be something like 15 Republicans up for office in the next election. And so there's lots of an opportunity to replace a number of the Republicans with Democrats. So let's get Stacey Abrams to organize people throughout the nation. She was the person who organized everybody in Georgia to win the elections down there. The next thing I would say about Biden is he's got to think big. I mean, no longer this small thinking stuff. We obviously have to deal with the pandemic. We obviously have to deal with the environment and provide some global leadership there. That's a place where the United States should step up and provide global leadership again. But, let's put together, a venture to go to Mars. Let's create an honest currency. It's really easy to do. China's already creating a cryptocurrency. The Federal Reserve is looking into it. Let's create an honest global currency, one that doesn't inflate or deflate. That would be a beautiful service to humanity, that could be done. Let's have a new Peace Corps, for God's sakes. Let's have our young people be able to go around the world and provide help where it's needed. There are many things like this that I think that they can consider now. The last one I'm going to point out is the common good capitalism. Everybody knows that what's going on Wall Street is mergers and acquisitions to have companies become number one or number two in their product market. I mean, CVS, Walgreens control 92% of the drugstores in the United States. There's Walmart, Target, and others. There's Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. There's Home Depot and Lowe's. They control 80-some%. I was on the board of Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs, we controlled 83% of the super premium ice cream market in the United States. These are basically duopoly monopolies. You know, we honestly coordinated our price rises with Haagen-Dazs, and everybody does. So does Home Depot and Lowe's. Everybody does this. This is modern business activity. Well, if that's the cooperation, then we should have them get together with a government official present and to reach agreements like the National Basketball Association does, to have the minimum wage be a quality minimum wage in each working area, to have environmental rules that they all agree on the same day to do, so that just like the National Basketball Association has rules of play and everybody has to follow the rules, and the auditors can be the referees. So let's get out of this naivete that in the information age that antitrust legislation can do anything. It can't really ultimately succeed. They don't have to be talking to each other in the information age to totally be coordinating their activities. Ever since the mergers and acquisitions took place to where there are 4 major airlines in the United States, the airlines have been making money like hands and fists. This has got to stop and move into. That's something else that they can do. But I want to move into something that I think is really significant for us all to be looking at. And that's what's happening in the thinking in the world today in quantum physics and in linguistic sciences. It has been understood for 80 years that our skill of human language, which allows us to be self-conscious, was a mutation that somehow jumped into our bodies 300,000 years ago, like we just got a jacket. And there's nothing to do with it other than, oh, we got a jacket. We now know from studying the Pariah tribe in Brazil that has not yet discovered time that that's not true. That the skill of human language and self-conscious is a skill. And just like riding a bicycle, there are layers of maturity of the skill. And most of humanity is stuck at the teenage or the adult layer, and there are a couple more layers after that. The second thing to point out in this area is that quantum physics has now got a new theory called the holographic theory. It's a very kind of complex thing to explain, but basically it says that they've come to the conclusion that time and space are not really real. Our whole sense of three-dimensionality is a mutually agreed upon illusion that allows us to be self-conscious. This is really significant. This is the next stage of maturity for humanity. And all of this is going to be happening over the next number of years. And so we need to understand this. And let me see how much time I have left here. Oh, Jesus, it doesn't come up. Well, I'm going to ask you, how much time, Tuba, do you know how much time I have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Everyone out there, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. And I'm going to ask you to use mature free choice. When you use mature free choice, you're keeping your power and you're using it to study your own direct experience rather than choosing a belief in words. Okay, here's the first question. Have you been breathing since you came out of your mother's womb? Da-da-da. I think the answer is yes. Did you sit up and choose to breathe since you came out of your mother's womb? Da-da-da. No, you didn't have the ability to do that then. So if I took your lungs out of your body and put them on a table, would you be able to breathe? No. So your lungs have to be in your body, and your body has to be healthy enough to breathe for you to breathe. If the air was not around you at all times, would you be able to breathe? No. If the earth didn't have the atmosphere it has, would you be able to breathe? No. If the earth wasn't in the particular relationship it is with the rest of the universe, if it had the relationship of Mars, Jupiter, or Venus, would you be able to breathe? No. So it's pretty obvious that all those things that I just mentioned have to all be doing what they're always doing and always in full cooperation with each other to be able to breathe. Whoa, that means the universe operates as an indivisible whole. So the next major breakthrough of humanity is there was a time before 1492 when people couldn't imagine a round so big that the earth could be round. Well, now people can't imagine a universe that would be an indivisible whole, but it is. And you just walk through the process of discovering in your own direct experience that the universe operates as an indivisible whole. This is going to change everything. Because up till now, nearly everyone has been operating as if they are only their physical body when they are really, first, the indivisible universe that will not die, and secondly, their physical body that will die. So the person speaking after me, I think, is a philosopher, and I think she's going to have fun with this. But the point I want to make to all of you is oneness is no longer a Buddhist idea. Oneness is the fundamental fact in physics. And that is going to be changing everything in the way we think going forward. That's all going to be for the positive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muller. Joined tonight, we also have Dr. Annette Boletsky. Annette Boletsky is a professor of philosophy at Tel Aviv University and Quinnipiac University in Hampton, Connecticut. Dr. Boletsky is the Albert Schweitzer Professor at Quinnipiac University. Boletsky was born in Jerusalem, Israel. She was a member of the B'Tselem in Israel Human Rights NGO, acting as chairperson from 2001 to 2006, and has served as a B'Tselem board member since 1995. Boletsky is a member of the executive board of the Faculty for Israeli-Palestine Peace International, which describes itself as a network of Palestinian, Israeli, and international faculty and students working in solidarity for a complete end of the occupation and just peace. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Boletsky. You have the floor.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute. How many times are we going to say that?
Right. Well, got off it. Because I have dogs and babies around me here, so I have to make sure that you only hear me now. And thank you so much. One day I will have to change the Wikipedia entry so that the things that are really passe will go there. But enough about me. I did want to immediately respond to Dr. Mollner, who said that I'm a philosopher. I am, but I think I'm not a philosopher. I do philosophy. But I do think that between the two of us, I will be the one on the ground where you were up somewhere in more ethereal places. And perhaps we'll connect later on. Hopefully we'll connect later on. I do want to mention also that I took that title really seriously, the implications of the elections on world peace, until last week happened. And then I said to myself, what am I going to do? What is the context in which we're going to do this? And right from the beginning, I had wondered at that concept, world peace, which Dr. Mollner, you did address. World peace. Well, I don't feel competent to talk about world peace, and I hardly feel competent to talk about American foreign policy, even though, again, that was what you mentioned. Dr. Muller, you went off into other things, but the first thing you said about Biden was that he would have to figure out foreign policy. And that's where I am going to try to go, but not foreign policy concerning world peace, but rather what is happening in the Middle East in general, and more particularly, of course, in Israel-Palestine, because that's what I know a little bit about. I hope it does all come in together. I hope it all meshes in together. The events of last week will make their presence in my talk in and out. It's something that is really hard to figure out, I think, at this point. And I am reading, as we all are, what everybody says about it. I read a lot of Israeli newspapers to see what they say about it. But let me just dive right into the implications of elections. In other words, the move from Trump to Biden on global peace, not world peace, sorry, global peace. And I want to start with a mantra. I thought this quote was from classics or from the Bible or the Talmud or something. Turns out it's Saul Bellow. I'm sure he probably took it from somewhere else. And the quote that I always think of is a fool, quote, a fool can throw a stone in a pond that 100 wise men cannot get out. Think of the fool as a madman as well, as an aberration, like what we've experienced in the last 4 years. And ask yourself if the 100 wise men, not to mention Biden, have any chance of pulling that stone out of the pond, especially if perhaps they're not that wise, but that's a matter for judgment. That fool, or we want to call him a madman, or people have been using much worse words here, supposedly made a peace deal in the Middle East, a few peace deals. What we got were peace deals, business deals between the rich and the dictators. We got a disaster for Palestinians, and I think I would say all over for the poor and the oppressed. So calling what Trump did peace or peace deals is really a misnomer, and especially that last thing that's called the normalization treaty between Israel and the Emirates. That was not a matter of peace because there never was any war there to begin with. What can we say then about Biden's team, given that we know, or we think we know, what Trump did? Some of us are very aghast at what Trump did. Just from the appointments that have been made, and this talks, Professor Mollner, to what you said about his foreign policy. We've got a team, Biden's team. I'm just going to mention some names. I don't know how much they mean to all of you, but I do know that for those of us who have been keeping up with peace work and with negotiations, the peace dance that's been going on for years and years, in the Middle East and, of course, in Israel-Palestine, a lot of these names mean something because they were there before. They were there during negotiations. They've been there either with Carter, with Bush. I didn't mean to say Carter. I meant to say Clinton, with Bush, with Obama, and now with Biden. We've got William Burns, who's now going to be head of the CIA, but he has a past as a diplomat. He was ambassador to Russia and Jordan. He was assistant secretary of state for Near Eastern affairs. He's the one who pushed through the Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire in June 2001. So this is someone who's been around during peace work. Wendy Sherman is now appointed or nominated as Deputy Secretary of State. She was part of the Iran deal, Obama's Iran deal, which I'll get to in a minute. Same for Jake Sullivan, who's going to be the National Security Advisor. By the way, he upholds American exceptionalism, and I will talk in a moment about American exceptionalism. Brett McGurk, he's the most interesting one. Not exactly clear what's going on there. He was with Trump. He was with Obama. He's been in Middle East work. And now he is appointed, I think, as Middle East coordinator of the National Security Council. He now is, as we want to say, against Trump. And he was for the Israel-UAE Normalization Pact, not only because that was against Iran, but also because of the threat he perceived from Turkey's regional politics. So he's an interesting guy. And then we have Anthony Blinken for Secretary of State, no less. We always think of him, and that's what they were writing when he got in, as having unique insight into the full range of national security issues. And Avril Haines for Director of National Intelligence, also many people lauding this as a wonderful choice. So we have people here who are professionals. That's the team that will be dealing with foreign affairs, a little security, CIA, stuff like that. Now, they are, as a group, thought of as centrist, apolitical, and professional. A lot of people, most people think it's a dream team. Other people put them down. How do we judge a team like that before they've come in? Well, as Stephen Walt says, judgment comes after, not before the fact. And the fact is going to be the events that happen. It's not ideology or the plans that they now have. But this is a professional group. I always wonder, people who say this is centrist and apolitical, what's so great about being centrist and what's so great about being apolitical? But they are professional, so I won't argue with that at all. But this group is, and this is again a quote from Steve Wald, who's really one of my prophets in this business. Steve Wald says that these people are, quote, committed to an image of U.S. global leadership that was never as successful as they believe and is badly outdated today. And that's what I want to talk about. Here are people who think that global leadership by America was wonderful, and they still want to use it now, and it's not clear that that is really what we want to do. If you look at the ideas that Biden wrote in his article from March 2020, I think it was, in Foreign Affairs, I think, the article was, let me just see, Why America Must Lead Again. There's a lot of sensible ideas in there, but there's a lot of meddling in other people's countries and telling them how to live. So Biden says, and this is what I call ideology, quote, sacred commitment to NATO, quote, ironclad commitment to Israel. Nothing about Palestinians there. Quote, reinvesting in our treaty alliances in Asia. Quote, integrate our friends in Latin America and Africa into democracies. Well, I wonder. These, again, sound like mantras. These sound like things that we've been hearing for so long. And as Walter Lippmann once said, when all think alike, no one thinks very much. Wouldn't it be nice to bring up some people who are who weren't for NATO enlargement, who were against the war in Iraq, who were against the surge in Afghanistan, etc. Also, talking about integrating our friends in Latin America and Africa into democracies, Dr. Mollner, here's what I would do as a philosopher. I'd ask, what do you mean by our friends? And what exactly do you mean by democracy? When we talk about our friends who Biden thinks are democratic, what do you say about Turkey, about India, about Poland, about Hungary, about Israel? What do you say about China, friend or not friend? How do you put these ideas together? Okay, so that's his team. That's the ideology that I see running the team. And when I think of change, I want to give 2 examples, or 2.5 examples of what one would mean by a change. Just recently, there was a letter published by many foreign policy and national security experts asking Biden, first of all, to make a break from Trump's Iran policy, from Trump's maximum pressure campaign, and return to the nuclear deal with Iran. Lots of interesting people in that group, a lot of academics, a lot of practitioners, just a few names that make you think that here are people thinking a little differently. Andrew Basovich, Peter Beinart, Jeremy Ben-Ami, Juan Cole, John Esposito, Lara Friedman, who would it be? John Mersheimer, Thomas Pickering is on there. I'm just looking at the whole list. John Turman, John Turney, and Stephen Walt. I've just mentioned the ones I really know well. They're not your regular standard thinkers. So they at least will give us something that might go away from that ideology that we have always held on to when we thought we were doing peace. So that's one example. Another example, and now I finally come back to Israel-Palestine, another example is the question what we do with the Israeli-Palestinian peace. There is an article by 3 people who are members in the Center for New American Security, and they call it, the article, A New U.S. Strategy for the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. They're still stuck in some old templates. They're still stuck in thinking of a final solution, thinking of a peace process, of 2-state solution, no other way to look at it, things like that. They're not really revolutionary, but at least about America, they're saying that America must give up the role of being the central driver. America must be more flexible. America must treat all parties, definitely those 2 parties, Israel and Palestine, but the rest of the world as just as important. And the one interesting thing is they say, let's not go into long-term negotiations. Let's be focused on specific deliverables. Let's make sure that humanitarian needs in Gaza and the West Bank are answered first of all. This was really interesting for me to see. It's trying to play the game, still be a part of that camp the way we've always thought of America, but let's try to do things a little differently. Interestingly, just this week, there was a meeting in Cairo by the foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, Germany, and France. And they said, let's start peace negotiations again. And I thought, oh my God, if we get back into that game, that party, that dance of peace negotiations, we'll never get anywhere. We have to do something other than peace negotiations. But they did say, again, let's start with small steps rather than some big final idea. And they said, let's make it clear that America is not an, quote, honest broker. So, Tuba, how much time do I have? Minus minutes?
I'll give you an extra minute.
1 more minute, because I'm really at the end. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So where are we coming from and where are we going? Trump sidelined the Palestinians, recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moved the embassy there, slashed financial assistance for Palestinians, reversed course on the settlements and said they're fine. What can we change there? Well, with Biden, for all sorts of reasons, I think we're still going to be stuck in that impractical two-state solution with no real progress. But Biden also has to think about American exceptionalism and global peace. And I think there's room for hope now with the radical side of the Democrats, the Democratic Socialists, the Squad, AOC, Omar, Presley, and Tlaib, and these people who look at peace through the prism of justice, not through world diplomacy that's predicated on militarism and financial globalism. I think that is the meaning of global peace, but it's not clear to me that we can really look to Biden or America in general for that type of real peace. And I'll talk about this week and what happened this week when we get to some sort of discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Dr. Nelson Alino. Dr. Alino is a tenured professor of accounting and taxation. He is currently the chair of the Department of Accounting and director of the MSA program at Quinnipiac University Lender School of Business. His tenure as the department chair of Quinnipiac is now into the 5th year. He has continued to take his administrative and leadership skills to higher levels following a series of successful projects at Quinnipiac. Prior to joining academia, Professor Alino worked in public accounting and healthcare audit. He rose to management levels in the banking industry in Nigeria. He started his own financial services from the United States and has been very active in the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria faculty activities. His research interest includes the evaluation of behavioral accounting and financial management. Dr. Nelson, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Tuba. Thank you, my co-participants. Thank you to co-panelists. It's interesting that, like Dr. Boletsky had said, I had a different thought coming into today's event until the most recent event last week that changed our thoughts about everything that we probably thought we knew up until that time. I actually took a lot of time to look at the topic that we're looking at today, the impact of elections on global peace. So again, when I look at elections coming from Nigeria, and actually I can think about Africa because I always have sleepless nights about the African continent and its relationships to the rest of the world. So when I look at that and I'm thinking about elections and global peace, I come to certain conclusions when I compare that to the American society and its elections that I've known over the years. I've been here for about 21 years in the United States, and I've experienced at least, I can say, if not close to 4 elections, and I've seen at least 4 presidents, including the current president-elect, Biden. And I'm hoping that this topic will not stop from our discussions here. I want to start by first saying that that Dr. Mollner had taken us to where I normally like to start thinking about things. As a behavioral accountant, I'm supposing that my engagement here is primarily to take us from just the basic socials to the economic aspect of things. But I think I like the 10 questions that you raised, where you talked about these 10 questions, that we should ask those 10 questions and bringing us back to the fact that we all should be thinking about not just our individual selves, but thinking about the entire globe, entire universe as being one, because we think that each and every one, each and every country of the world, each and every institution of the world kind of must come together for the world to function well. So when we talk about peace, I like to start by first looking at the socioeconomic and political fault lines that I will go back to reading history, reading religious documents that kind of take us back to years, thousands of years before now, to see that it might be a little naive for us to think that we can create a global peace. And I really worry so much, like Dr. Boletsky said, I don't know about global peace. I don't know about world peace. But I ask the question first, can people think about the relevance of elections on regional peace? The relevance of elections on local peace. When we can go back to create peace from elections within that little community, then we can begin to make some impact. And I like to go back to, I read a lot of books, I read a lot of literature, but I think I've learned more from my grandmother, who kind of told me that you start to begin to experience goodness from home. You start from home to experience goodness. So if you want peace, peace must start from home. So elections that in the United States today, I've witnessed a lot of elections here where we're still having that difficulty accepting defeat. And that by itself cannot create peace. And what that does, it kind of fuels itself time after time. If we can begin to first accept our results, if we think elections are supposed to provide, which is what I think is supposed to do, elections are supposed to provide that remedy, supposed to provide the transparency that is important in order for us to overcome the existing fault lines. Because anytime you have political parties, you have two different groups, three different groups, four different groups fighting for a position. That means you have an existing fault line that will actually crack with just a little, very little push. All we need is just something to tilt it, something to stimulate that, and that fault line breaks. It could be social, it could be economic, and it could be political. So as a result, I think the thing we need to begin to think about is, I don't want to go back, and I think my colleagues have spoken well. My co-panelists, they've spoken well about all the errors and all that. I think I want to focus our thoughts at what the topic today is all about: global peace. So I want to remove the global and just think about peace. And we can talk about the Middle East, we can talk about Africa, we can talk about the United States, actually can talk about my local community. And we can break this down into our families. And I think until we can begin to have that personal reflection about the relevance of seeing others the way they are and accepting them for what they are, the way they are, and not thinking about them as some kind of unit, some kind of grouping, some kind of uh, putting people in isolation, we will have global no peace. Let me put it that way. There will be no peace globally until we can come to the point where every single individual is perceived as a person that is relevant to the global unit. Just like the 10 questions, none of this, the entire universe will not function without each and every component. So until we can come to that point, we will not have global peace. So if I take that back to elections, elections by themselves seem to be a battlefield. That's all I've known about elections as a young person growing up in Nigeria. We have elections, you have people struggling to get power. That is the quest for power. That power intoxication is what is creating the problem. Now, nations can think about other nations as a source of helping themselves to establish that power. And that is why it beats me to know that Africa has the highest percentage of reserve of all sorts of mineral resources all over the world. And still, the African nation is still perceived as being non existent. That's the way I look at it. And I'm going to really now bring it back to the newly elected president and his cabinet. What is expected of the United States by the world is unimaginable. I speak to people back in Africa, back in Nigeria, where I come from, and the expectations are that we will have a new government that will come in that will be better for the world. That is an expectation. That is what people are looking for. Now, the question is, how can you achieve that for the world if you cannot get your own environment, the immediate United States of America, stabilized? So I'm going to stay away from talking about the politics of what is the global affairs, what are they going to do, international affairs for the incoming government. I think I think the first 100 days of this government should be spent thinking of how can we normalize our own country? How can we stabilize our own country? I am really worried because I've seen over time we've had different uprisings, different situations, different crises until the backbreaking one that happened last week, Wednesday. It's really becoming something that has to be addressed urgently. And I think to do that, the incoming administration must establish themselves as the owners of the problems on hand. If we begin to apportion blame to other people, we will go back to what we've always seen. And that is not going to be what the world needs. It's not going to be what America needs. So let me also, because of the shortness of time, and we can talk about a lot of this later on. So, like I said, we can start with regional, local peace. And then, of course, we have to address election violence. I look around the world everywhere, but Africa, everywhere, there's always that violence that is attributable to elections. Can we begin to address that by having a legal system in all the election, or in all the regions of the world that can stand by itself? Again, it goes back to the individual. Each individual person must realize that they have value addition to the entire global peace. And that has to start from the self, from the immediate family to the local, of course, to the state. It is easy for one to come out. For example, I can come out as a politician. I can tell you every good thing you want to hear. But the point is, what is it in my conscience that will help us get to that point? And I was going to bring up the economic aspect of this, which is something I think we can get to later on. And I did talk to my colleagues before this event about a country like Nigeria. As a young man coming up, I realized that we had, and I say this a lot to my students, and we use it for our discussions, where you're thinking about in the 70s when the dollar will exchange, $4 will exchange for 1 naira at a point. I used to remember the dollar was 25 pennies, 25 pence. That's what we used to call it. It was 25 to $1. And today, it is $1 to the equivalent of 500 naira, the Nigerian currency. Think about that. And I want people to go back, look at that. That is a result of elections. So elections have impact on the economy, and they also have impact on world peace. That is why till date in Nigeria you still have conflicts, because you have that kind of devastation of the economic environment. Of course, you're going to affect the peace of that environment. What happens is now you see external forces coming in because there's an opportunity there for them to now get into the country and rip us off as much as they can. And America should be careful about that because, again, it is the process. It takes a little while for us to get off, and then everything is broken. If the incoming administration here can look at that, think of the economy, think of the social, political, economic impacts within this country before we can extend it outside. And we can talk about other aspects of this. I'm not sure how much time I have, but there's a lot that we can talk about. There are a lot of things that we can discuss, but except I have a little more time just to wrap up. Tuba, can you tell me if I have more time?
I'm so sorry. We're looking at -3.
Okay. All right.
I'll
So
give you
we leave it
30
at there,
seconds
and
to
then we
wrap
have
up, please.
questions. Oh, okay. And I think the key thing that people need to start thinking about, if we want to really generate elections that make sense, can we start thinking about what I call succession planning? I don't think that is really happening, because what I've seen, what I complained about in Nigeria, I see it happening here in the US. And I think we need to really address those things carefully. Can we think of succession planning where we can allow new ideas, new concepts, new brains come into policymaking within the countries? I know sometimes we implant those here and there just to make the political environment look good, but I think it's an important thing for us to begin to inject new ideas, new perceptions into the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. That was a lot of stuff I needed to hear personally. I'm looking at the questions. We have a couple. And do you guys have any questions that you would like to ask each other? We can give about 2-minute answer time. Or I'll go straight to a question that was asked directly to Dr. Annette. It says, Dr. Annette, are you suggesting a regional solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? A great idea. Would you care to elaborate on it? I like that idea, was also another comment.
Thank you. That's really important. And in fact, it was part of the stuff that I left out. In that paper that I mentioned by the three people talking about America, the new U.S. strategy, they are interestingly saying that the normalization pact between Israel and the UAE was a good thing, except it left the Palestinians out, the Israel-Palestine issue out. And am I suggesting a more, call it area arrangement? Yes, on condition that you don't leave the Palestinians out. Now, I would personally love to have Turkey on board, Iran on board, Egypt and Jordan are on board, but where are the Palestinians? So yes, of course, Israel has to be a part of the Middle East. In Israel, we joke that we are, people have said this, Barak said this, we are a villa in the jungle. Well, no, we're not. The jungle is all over the world, and there are villas all over the world. We have to be a part of the Middle East. It has to be a Middle East arrangement, including several of the strong parties, but not leaving ever the Palestinians out of the equation, which is what has been going on all along, and with Trump explicitly.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for anyone that would want to take it. If you could just raise your hand and we'll just zoom straight into you. The question is, do you think the Biden administration can foster a global peace initiative while strong men are still in charge in many G20 countries?
I think, Annette, that's
Dr.
better for you. Can
Muller,
you
yeah.
respond to
I'm sorry?
Terry, go ahead. Why don't you?
No. I said Annette. I think that's a question that you would be best able to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would be, but I would just say that I think that talk, and it's coming from different things, both from what Terry said and what Nelson said. I think this label, global peace, is misplaced. I don't think anyone can start a policy of global peace. We do have the United Nations. We do have international and global bodies and institutions working on these things. But the United States, I think the United States trying to lead a campaign of global peace will be taken in the wrong way by many parties, and perhaps it won't be the wrong way, it would be the right way.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is that Kamala Harris is a strong woman, and she should have a portfolio of doing many things around the world to really reveal to the world that a woman of skills and abilities can do it all with the men. I think that was a little bit included in the person's question. But she has the capability of really being a good negotiator, and she should have a strong role.
Right. I think that's actually a main reason why Biden felt so confident going
Right.
in
Yeah.
with her role. I actually have a personal question that
Chima, can I just
yes,
add,
Yes.
just a tiny thing to that? When I sort of trashed Biden's team, I certainly didn't mean to trash the team as a whole. I was talking about the Security International bunch. Clearly, this team is diverse, is different, is so inclusive. When you look at that vis-a-vis Trump's teams because they kept changing, and even Obama's teams, this is something that gives really great hope.
right. Thank you.
And just to look at it, just to re-emphasize what I said originally, is the question is whether the incoming team will be able to influence any of this, given all the people that are still out there. My thought is the group of people that are out there now, they're going to make it difficult for anyone coming from the United States attempting to negotiate any kind of peace. And now, will that come later on? Possibly, but in the first year of this administration, I think the kind of global outreach they're going to have is more of trying to appease and dampen what has been a very, very strained thought about the United States, especially given the past week's event. It's going to take the United States some time to really begin to rebuild the trust that can now help you to now step into if there's anything called global peace, or if there's anything called some kind of peace that can be reached, or negotiations that can be reached outside. We need to first clean up and be able to make some rebuilding back home.
Thank you. We have a question. It says, any thoughts on how we all should learn about others, in quotation marks, be they local or in other countries? Every time we seem to take a step forward, things seem to collapse, perhaps due to the economic issues.
I think I can come here and kind of start this up. To be fair to ourselves, like I said, this dates back thousands of years. I mean, we can look at the different powers that has risen up in the world over the years, and how the individuals that we are had kind of evolved. Uh, Now, I can give an example. When I moved to the United States, just to give you an idea of how people can begin to study themselves, and I give credit to the military, United States military, giving the opportunity to people to travel outside the United States, live out there, and we talked about the Peace Corps, right? We talked about the Peace Corps. There was an opportunity there for people to move to other places to study them, to see how they live and how they behave. I was here when I moved over here. Interestingly, I can count how many people that asked me if we lived on trees. And it's something that people don't mention so much. I still go back and I tell my kids about it. I came here with a master's degree, and I knew a lot about computers coming here. I did a lot of things. I came here as a senior manager from a big bank that has a global outreach. And what I was getting was, oh, do you guys live on trees? Have you seen lions? Do you live around lions? And I hear this from people I thought would have been exposed to how others live. And that it actually is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed first, is education. And I was going to talk about that because that's what I do, is talk about the education system. Because we can talk about people scoring high grades, but they are not educated because they lack the opportunity to be open-minded. I can't forget someone telling me that you can't speak good English. And by the way, I told the person, I said, I think my English was certified by the Queen, because my environment, we started with the English. And the person said, you can't speak good English, so you can't even serve up front when I was going to get a job. So it's that kind of, can we educate the people individually, give them the natural, I mean, there's what I call common education. It's not the education on campus, the education in school, but expose people, allow people to travel out. I have students that I discuss with, they've not gone outside the environment where they were born. And they still plan to live within that environment when they graduate. And you begin to think about it, is that how would they know about someone from Pennsylvania if you've not been to Pennsylvania? So let's leave the outside world, but you need to be able to understand how someone in Texas lives. You need to have someone from Texas come in, and that opportunity there needs to be stressed. And once we can do that, we begin to understand ourselves, and then we can go back to answering those 10 questions. Can I really exist if those other people are not there? Very important. I like those 10 questions, and I'll.
Tuba, I'd
Thank
like to come in on this.
Yes, definitely.
First of all, Nelson, I want to tell you that I was born and raised in Nebraska in the middle of the United States. And when I came to New England, people asked me if I still wore a gun on my holster, on my hip, and if we only had dirt roads. So it doesn't only happen in the
Yeah,
United States in
yeah.
Nigeria. But the other thing I want to, the
Oh
main
yes,
reason I asked,
yeah,
the main reason I asked the 10 questions is because now it's obvious to you, it is the universe that is doing your breathing. That's the point of the 10 questions. It's the universe, the indivisible universe that's doing your breathing. You are not choosing to do your breathing. You are naturally and effortlessly doing your breathing. If you ask who's doing your breathing, you discover it's the universe doing your breathing. But the other thing is that once you realize that the universe is an indivisible whole and you're first it, and it's not going to die, but you're going to die, you then think of the wonderful words of the poet Robert Frost, who said, I can summarize everything I've learned about life in 3 words. It goes on. It'll go on when we're all gone. And the point that is important to make is that what's important for us to do is not to give priority to our own physical body self-interest, because there is no physical body self-interest in the way that we have been thinking about it. There's only the indivisible universe, and we have this skill of self-consciousness, which allows us to create a human language, which allows us to be self-conscious, which allows us to use the illusion of time and space to know how to cooperate with each other for the maturation of humanity and the universe. What's fundamentally going on in nature is not competition, because there's no separate parts. So what's going on is cooperation, and the kind of cooperation that's going on is maturation. And so if you take a look at history, what is it? It's the story of maturation. And that's what's the fundamental process in nature. So all of these are very new ideas that the physicists are going to be talking about, and many other people are going to be talking about. This goes back, not to St. Thomas Aquinas, act and potency, if you remember all that. That there's a way to put all this together in a way that makes sense now. If you didn't see the Nova show, the Einstein dilemma that was on 2 weeks ago, it tells the whole history since 1927, when Einstein and Niels Bohr disagreed, and how they still haven't resolved the question, but now they think they may have, and it is because they've discovered that time and space is a mutually agreed upon illusion as a result of human language. So the punchline is, too, but to get to the punchline, I know Anna wants to come in. The punchline is that will have us see the other as ourselves. That's the key thing. Starting from an ideology that I should like black people, that doesn't work. What works is when I know I am Nelson, that works.
Yep.
So Anat,
Yeah.
what did you want to come in with?
No, but I just wanted to come back to Terry and to Nelson. I see from one of you, from Nelson, I see the word education. From Terry, I see natural development, evolution, neurolinguistics, these more scientific things. And for me, those two do not necessarily go together. So what I would ask you, Terry, is what do you think that our natural linguistic skills first say the word I, and then 50,000 eons later say the word we? How do we develop, according to your way of looking at this, to understand the we and the you, not too much later than we understand I, except through education?
No, education is really important, and that's really sad. What's really sad, why would 74 million people vote for Donald Trump? There's a clear problem with our educational system in the United States. It's important to know that the native tribes in the United States, many of them had not yet discovered the word I. They only used we's. They came from the oneness. a child only knows oneness until it begins to learn a language. And so the I comes much later than the we. The we is natural. So there's much more to say there,
Thank
but
you.
let's see if Tuba's got another question for us.
I do. I actually have a whole bunch, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to save two, possibly three left. Three more, possibly, if we have time. But I have a nice one that caught my attention as well. Would a U.S. leadership in green economy, carbon zero production, possibly trigger a global peaceful movement at the international policy level, which might help reduce conflict in red zones?
Okay, well, let
I'm
me
going to throw something in on
just
this.
okay. Yeah,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Nelson. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Oh, I was going to
Here's
say
another
again,
here's another thing that's about to. Okay, here's another thing that I
okay.
think is about to happen, Tuba. This democracy that we have and that most of the world uses is a very immature form of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want to have to get together with all the people in my town and do democracy. It's a pain in the ass. There's a lot of real extreme Trump's people here. And, I want to get together with people who think like me. So we have a very, consensually grounded, cooperative building spot. And then I want to work with those people and join an association with other groups of friends like that. And so that's the next stage of maturity for democracy, not based on geography. Nation states is a crummy way to organize the planet. It's based upon agreement, people getting together. And so this is called common good nation or agreement nations. And so what I believe is going to begin to happen is that the Tea Party will create theirs, Bernie Sanders will create his, Oprah will create hers. Everybody will begin to put together their own agreement nations. And all the agreement nations will be able to work with one another where they find a mutual good idea to do it. So slowly over time, the geographic nations will become like utility districts that most people don't even know the name of them anymore, where the name of the utility district where they live. I think of this in the Palestinian-Israeli situation, because I've been to Israel. What if the funny thing that happened to me when I'm in the old city of Israel, they have the Palestinian section, the Israeli section, then this other section, this other section, another section. But then when there's time to go to the temple, the Islamic people go to the temple, they put a bar over their stalls so they can go to the temple. They don't even close their stores. And so I noticed that a lot of those stores were in the Israeli section. So I asked the Israelis, why are these Islamic stalls in your Israeli section? He said, oh, they make more money here. And I said, I thought you guys were in conflict. And they say, no. We're not in conflict. The politicians are in conflict, but we're not in conflict. So there's this wild situation. And so my thought was, what if the Palestinians got together and organized their nation by agreement? And the Israelis did it by agreement, and they stopped fighting over the dirt.
I'm not going to answer that beginning to end, except to say that there's no Israeli section in the Old City because it's all ruled over by Israel. There are different groups, religions or ethnic groups, but Israel is the state that rules everything. And the answer that they all want each other's money, well, that's what runs a lot of the, call them semi-solutions, thinking that if we can economically deal with this, we will deal with the rest. I think there are deeper things than economics, but of course, but I've got two economists and accountants here who can speak to this much better than I can. I think more of ideologies and beliefs and democracy as not just a give and take that has to do with, and you mentioned that before, with any type of capitalism, be it global capitalism or American capitalism.
The main thing I'd like to leave the listeners to this, or the viewers of this show, there's a place for lots of optimism. We're going to emerge into common good capitalism. We're going to emerge into agreement democracies. We're going to emerge into all kinds of new and more mature ways of doing things as a result of more mature ways of thinking. And all of it can happen very rapidly today. So I think that being too focused on national politics is a mistake. What we want to do is start to grow up and be adults and to put together our own agreement nation and take charge of ourselves and join with other like-thinking people and cut deals with other groups that do the same thing. There's lots of good ways that the Tea Party and the Bernie Sanders agreement nation could do lots of good things together.
Can
By
I
free
tell a
choice.
philosophical joke about being optimistic? I mean, since you said there's room
Yeah,
for
sure.
optimism. So this comes from Leibniz's idea of possible worlds, and the optimist thinks that this is the best of all possible worlds, and the pessimist knows it is.
That's a sad quote.
Yes.
Right. That was my
Right.
cynicism. Sorry, but
I think you've all addressed what I was thinking about. So yeah, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna ask
Go
you
ahead.
if you were
Yeah.
going to say something, so okay. I actually, so I know we're dying to talk about it, but we've kind of had enough of it. Not enough, but like as it's transpiring, as it's still going on. And as you all said, you had prepared different talks up until last Wednesday. And this, I think, is a direct result of why peaceful transition of power is just so important. Is there something you guys, so why is it in a global peace seeking for such a thing, why is peaceful transition of power so important, and why must America, the US, be a leading figure on this?
I'm one of six
So
children.
let me go ahead and
That-
kind of put my 1 cent there so we can have that discussion going in. Uh, Again, think about it. You cannot proceed to tell someone else how to live if you're not living well. I like to break things down as simple as they can be. So the philosopher can talk about it with some more, zeal. Is think about this. How can I tell you to do something that you see me not doing right? I'll take myself as a teacher. I'm not going to walk in front of my students to tell them something that they know that, oh, look at him. He's telling me to do this. He's not even doing it himself. I can't tell them to dress well to come to class. A simple thing, right? If I'm not well dressed, again, they're going to look at me like, are you really serious? So that's why a peaceful transition in the United States will be a starting point. And like I said previously, it doesn't stop there. Being able, again, I know we've talked about the different, call them silos, everyone in their own thing. But until you can begin at home to make people realize that we're all the same, we can get upset even at families. I don't know anybody who is in a family that can tell me that they don't have sometimes disagreements. Can you find a way to resolve when you're close to each other day in, day out? If you cannot resolve it in Congress, starting from there, I don't know why you want to sit on a TV and tell me anything otherwise. You got to start from there to resolve it. And I want to see a Congress that will come together and talk about things, and so we can get children to listen to it. As a kid growing up, to be honest, I used to sit back and listen to political discussions that were done genuinely, where people can throw out their arguments, state their situation, and the other side will throw out the arguments, state their situation, and then we are human beings. We can now think about it. But what I've seen over time is you have groups of people starting from Congress, from our leaders, saying things that we don't see them doing. And with that, there's no way you want to start projecting any kind of, oh, we want you to be peaceful. To be honest, I listen to people, especially I'm talking about Nigeria now, and they look at it and I say, look, how can those people come to tell me they're watching elections here? That's reality. You can't tell somebody you're coming to supervise the election when you can supervise your own and we can have peaceful transition. So until we can get to that point, I think the US will not have a locus to stand on to even discuss this with anyone else.
Thank you. Dr. Mollner, Boletsky, any thoughts?
I was just going to
just
point out that I'm one of six children, and two of my siblings are devout Trumpsters. And so you say, how could that happen? How could we all grow up in one very close family and have that happen? And the reason is, the other thing I didn't point out, the main thing we're learning is the relationship between human language and the oneness of nature. And the nature of human language is you fundamentally break things down to hot, cold, left, right. And so as long as we're still living in the world of separate parts and of human language is real, we are all going to be polarizing. And we're always going to be living in a polarized construct as our fundamental construct. When you understand the oneness of nature, you realize there's another pattern of thinking. That's not this or that. The other pattern of thinking is giving priority to priorities. There's no factor of time and space with priorities. So I can know myself as the indivisible universe and as this physical body, Terry Mollner, both at the same time, in the same way that I know that I am this whole physical body, which I operate as if it's one indivisible whole, and my hand and my heart and my liver at the same time as secondary in importance at all times. So we all know the oneness pattern of thinking, and we all already use it. It's inside our skin. Inside our skin, we assume oneness. You know, when we get an automobile accident and our leg has to be amputated, we don't amputate our body, we amputate the leg. We give priority to the whole body. And so we use the oneness pattern of thinking already. It's not something we have to go learn from the East. We already use it every day, all day, within our own skins. What we have to do is realize that that pattern of thinking is also the accurate pattern of thinking for using everywhere else as well. The universe is not a contradiction where it's oneness pattern of thinking when inside our skin and separate parts pattern of thinking everywhere else. That's an illusion that we're going to be ending.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Boletsky, I believe you were about to say something.
Yes, I was about to take us down to the ground again.
I think this is very much on the ground. I disagree with that. It's very, very practical.
I want to say that there was an article yesterday, I think it was, maybe it was even today, by Brenner on in the Washington Post, comparing what happened last week in Washington with the Munich beer hall putsch in 1923, not 1938, 1923, the first time Hitler, or not the first, but the first time that we know well that Hitler tried to take over. It was a riot. The people were arrested. They were sent to jail, as was Hitler. But they kept on fighting. And that's how we got to 1938, not to mention 1939. I think there is a fight here, and that thinking of the oneness is maybe a great, again, ideological way or conceptual way of thinking of things. But the question is what to do now about a peaceful transition. And that takes, I think, very strategic thought. I don't know that we have one answer, but I think that the jolt of last week will get people to think about it. And that's why I think we are thinking differently. Hopefully, it won't go the way we did after the jolt of 9/11. That also did something, and we went with more militarism, more interventionism, more exceptionalism. I hope that this time around we'll think of other things in figuring out how to retain a peacefulness that we thought we were in anyway, and we weren't.
Thank you. I don't know about you guys, but this was the conversation I much needed to have. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you to our viewers. It's the end of our program. I'd like to thank each and every one of you. And that's it. Any final words that you guys would like to say, or?
I would like to throw out, I have a feeling there may be some people who are watching this who might be interested in building an agreement nation. So I've written a book on it. It's called Common Good Nation. You can get it on Amazon. And I've also written a book on common good capitalism. You can get it on Amazon. And so capitalism, common good capitalism is inevitable is the name of that. So that's for the people who want to dig into this deeper.
Yeah, we'll definitely add that into our description for this panel.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Nope.
Good
All right.
luck
Thank
to
you all so much. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
Looking forward to next Wednesday. Thank you all so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tuba. It was a delight.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.